Tēnā koutou, katoa, ko Atlantic, ko Pacific, nā moana, ko Lukulis te awa, ko French, ko Australian, ko Hungarian, nā iwi. He whangai ahau o te iwi o Ngāti Kuri. Kei te whanganui atara ahau e noho ana, kei WWF ahau e mahi ana. He kai hautu ahau, ko Olivia Esterhazy tōku ingoa, no reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome and bienvenue to this fantastic session that we have for you today. It is well packed in. I started with a mihi whakatau, which is a Māori opening, and I'm sure most of our Pacific viewers understand all of that. But basically coming from French, Australian, Hungarian, and New Zealand backgrounds. But what's really important is in the Māori and Pacific Island culture, there is a belief that we take care of our natural world, and that natural world will then take care of us. Indeed, in Māori culture, there are many whakatauki or proverbs that relate to this concept, and I would like to share one with you. Toi tū te marae o tānei, toi tū te marae o Tangaroa, toi tū te iwi. Protect and strengthen the realms of the land and sea, and they will protect and strengthen the people. So, can nature really help the problems that have been caused by generations of unsustainable activity by humans? Globally, our land and marine ecosystems are so badly impacted that water and food security and human health cannot be taken for granted anymore. We're dealing with natural disasters, climate change, biodiversity loss, and much more. And as we all know, it's our small island developing states, such as those in the Pacific Islands, that are some of the worst affected. We've got a lot to get through today, and we have some great experts in the field to offer presentations and guide us through a discussion. We will hear about global best practice standards, as well as field examples from around the Pacific region. We will also have an opportunity to discuss how nature-based solutions contribute to policy agendas, such as global climate policy. However, as with any proposed or potential solution, it's vitally important that we understand the limitations, and there will be opportunity to discuss these today. We hope that as an outcome of this session, we will collectively discuss and develop a recommendation to help scale up nature-based solutions in the Pacific region. So keep your ears and minds focused on this as you listen to our first few presentations. This whole hour or so will be split into three parts. The first part will be on nature-based solutions, global standards, and restoring mangroves collectively in the Pacific. The second part will be on nature-based solutions as a tool to achieve a carbon neutral, nature positive world by 2030. And in the last 20 minutes, we'll be opening up discussions with the attendees, and your questions will be answered, which will be quite exciting. So I'm going to kick straight off. As I said, we do have quite a few fantastic speakers today. And the first speaker is Andrew Foran, who is the coordinator of the Iucn Oceania Regional Office. Andrew describes himself as focusing on bringing people together and empowering them in the pursuit of values-driven goals. He is also personally committed to making society more socially and economically prosperous and equitable within our environmental limits, of course. I think these are absolutely amazing goals, Andrew, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to provide some global context and standards on nature-based solutions. So over to you.
Thank you, Olivia. Just share the screen. Welcome, welcome everyone. Merci beaucoup to our host New Caledonia. Very exciting sessions we've been having here so far. So, just see if my slides are changing. Oh. Apologies, colleagues, I'm just getting a little technical glitch.
Sometimes the little keys on the bottom help, the arrow keys.
Yes, no, that's exactly what I'm pressing. So I'm not getting something there. We'll have a technical hitch. Let me just come back out of that and we'll try again. I was working wonderfully before. I might be on the wrong. Let's try this one. That's a little better. That's a little better. Fantastic. Look, I'm just going to have a little brief look at the global standard in this session and a little bit of regional context and some suggested next steps from this in the region. So before we start, I just thought, look, you know, a reminder for us all, not that we need reminding, this diagram of the SDGs sort of highlights that the environment underpins our lives and our livelihoods. And without the environment, we really have neither of them. I think this is the context that nature-based solutions sits in. So for Iucn, we define nature-based solutions, essentially three elements. Protecting, managing and restoring ecosystems, number one. But number two, doing this in ways that address societal challenges, and we'll have a look at those later. And three, for the purpose of providing benefits for both human well-being and for biodiversity. So that's, you know, once you break that down, that's where that looks at. There's been a bit of a journey to get to where we are today with the standards. You know, I guess it all started and it all revolves around the ecosystem approaches: forest landscape restoration, ecosystem-based adaptation, eco-DRR. And I guess, in essence, nature-based solutions synthesises those, and the idea, I guess, is to make them more powerful. We've been through a journey with a whole range of partners through this process, and now we end up here today all the way with a standard in front of us. So what is the standard? Look, essentially a facilitative design tool, I think, is the key part. The verification, design and scaling up of NBS. It brings together different and equally valid and needed forms of knowledge. Been some fantastic broad global consultations with that. And it also fits within a formal global standards process. And we'll touch on that. And that's part of the discussion on the relevance for the region for all those elements. Why have a standard in the first place? It's a very good question. For me, a couple of the key things are really around that common language and understanding. I think that's a really important thing. There's a lot of nature-based solutions happening out there, but what do we even mean by that? So I think it's important for us all to be on the same page. And look, one other point I wanted to pull out of these ones in terms of the purpose of the standard is our donor and financing partners are starting to incorporate nature-based solutions and, of course, the standards and the criteria that exist within those. So I think that's a key part of things we need to think about moving forward in the Pacific. You know, where's that going to fit as we look at concepts come across our desk that say, hey, have you included the nature-based solutions in your project design? So that's a key part of it. Plus all those other reasons we can see on the slide there. The scope, look, very much around that, iterative framework and tool to guide decision-making, I think is at the heart of it. There is the verification side of it, but I'm not sure that certification in and of itself is a focus. It's certainly not to begin with, but it is something moving forward. It's a great cross-sectoral tool, and I think, again, highlighting that it's a facilitating standard, not a normative one, is a key point. And just one last one before we jump into it is the governance structure. There is a global governance structure that's connected with this. You know, it is a formal process-driven standard, which is great. It means it's robust, it's transparent, there's learning and improving for future solutions around that. And we want to touch on that a little later around the regional hubs in that space. So what does it look like? At its simplest, it's 8 criteria with a set of associated indicators. And we're just going to have a quick look through at each of those criteria this afternoon. So it begins with a starting point of a societal challenge. Look, they're relevant across all regions, but as you look at those key societal challenges, I think in the Pacific, these are things we focus on day to day in our work. The second criteria, the design is informed by scale. That doesn't mean it has to be a big project. Nature-based solution actions can be small, but they need to take into account the broader scale systems and the risks into account when you're designing the project. The next 3 criteria are really about the environment, economics, and people. The 3 pillars of sustainability, I guess you could say. So for environment, we're looking for net gains to biodiversity and ecosystem integrity. For the economic side of the house, it needs to be viable. from that perspective. Criterion 4. And criterion 5, this is all about people. And I think at the heart of everything we do here in the Pacific, this is what I love about this region, is our focus on inclusive and transparent governance processes here. I think that's a really key thing and an absolute strength that I picked up from a few of the sessions here early today in different contexts. So that sort of sustainable people, economy and environment, they're the 3 pillars. And it's unrealistic to think we'll always have a win-win-win triple bottom line sort of outcome straight up. So that's where criterion 6 comes in. It's looking at the trade-offs. Each time decisions need to be taken, what is used today and kept for tomorrow, who gains and benefits, who gets returns later down the line. Obviously, each decision is always context specific. But the standard really looks at ensuring some transparency and inclusive decision-making in the process. The last two criteria, I think criteria 7 is a straightforward one. We're implementing solutions under changing conditions. The ecosystems themselves are dynamic. Throw in climate change, all sorts of other assumptions that you might have at the beginning of a project or an activity or an investment can change. So very much that's straightforward there. And then the last criterion is very much the aspirational one about embedding and institutionalizing nature-based solutions. Because look, if we're looking at this, we can't really achieve the ambitions that are behind this through one-off short-term project. Very much about sectoral policy mainstreaming, integrating MBS into regulatory operational frameworks of companies, in their tender processes, those sorts of things, and grounding in community-based governance structures as well. That's really what we're talking about here, and a lot of that stuff's already there. Sometimes it's in different frames and languages. So that's the standard, a very short and sweet nutshell there. But bring it back down to the region. Launched the global standard in July. We hosted a launch here in Oceania, and thank you very much to the Fiji Ministry of Environment for supporting that. You can get a whole lot of stuff online. We've got the standard itself. There's guidance documents and a whole bunch of other stuff there. So highly recommend you check that out online. So we've started the process here. Nature-based solutions have been happening and talked about, and governments have been delivering on it. I know here in Fiji they have for many years now. And with our discussions, with a range of partners over the years, I've listed a few things here that are really more food for thought or conversation starters about what are the priority areas for us in the region. I think a lot of them are pretty straightforward. The picture there shows the Fiji Prime Minister commissioning some hybrid seawalls, which the government's been rolling out here. And look, obviously the first and last of those priority areas is very heart and soul of that with climate change adaptation and the hybrid grey-green infrastructure, and has been doing some great stuff on that. So next steps, Iucn is the steward of the Global Nature-Based Solutions Standard. We've been having a lot of discussions with our regional and national partners in these past months, and through that we've framed some key steps. And again, these are things we want to discuss more with everyone. So, but these are what we're looking to do and invest in, and we're working with donor partners around this. So a collaboration hub at the heart of it, with a coordinator, and looking at that user group and community of practice. And that governance structure I showed you before on the global standard, we very much want to have regional representation on that as well, so the Pacific gets to drive some of the iterative development of that. But then, of course, we've got lots of international and regional expertise sitting in-house in the region. And one example is the Commission on Ecosystem Management in Oceania Group. They're hosting a seminar on the 15th of December, about 8 a.m. Fiji time. You can check all that out online as well. But they're really driving some key stuff there as well. The awareness and capacity training is a big focus there for us. We're already working with SPREP and other partners on some green infrastructure training in Fiji and Solomon Islands, which is really good. So that's a key area of ongoing focus there. And then it's what we've framed as the knowledge product. So we're looking there at things like, you know, investment strategy and the resourcing and implementation that go with that. There's opportunities for technological innovation and development. We think in the region where we can really build some stuff out of that. Some very interesting stuff around financing with development banks and insurance with preferred premiums or lower interest rates if people have built in nature-based solutions into their projects. And then very much, and the grey-green infrastructure guidelines and spaces is another key area there. So just to finish off, I've got a couple of opportunities that are just started or just about to start. I wanted to flag to everyone out there for the region. So the Kiawah Initiative, a multi-donor fund led by our colleagues at AFD, right across the region, all the ACP countries, including Timor-Leste. SPREP and SBC are implementing that in partnership with Iucn. We're looking after a small grants program, so that'll be coming to you guys pretty soon. Look out for it. Watch this space first quarter next year, perhaps a little bit later on that as we get rolling out. We just had the signing ceremony yesterday, so thank you to all the donors and partners on that one. And an upcoming one that we're also working with on SPREP is the Coastal Marine Ecosystem Resilience Program. It's a GCF-funded, large, EBA-focused, innovative program. Two components. SPREP's really focused on the national priorities, the governance, the planning, the over-the-horizon, you know, what's happening in 30 and 50 years space. And Iucn's going to be looking after the Blue Impact Facility, which will be grants and other financial mechanisms as well. So that's full project design. We've got some funding for GCF for that. That should be wrapped by the end of the year next year, we hope. So the team's working on that right now. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you very much for listening. Please don't hesitate to connect with us here at Iucn Oceania on anything you want to hear about MBS. Looking forward to the Q&A, and you can touch base with us during the conference or any time. So Vinaka Vaka Levu, and thank you very much.
Merci, kia ora, and thank you, Andrew. That was a fantastic session and a great opening, starting from the global standard and working our way down. So now we are going to work our way down and actually bring it all to life at the community level. And I'm going to introduce the team, or the team of the Iucn French Committee will present some fantastic examples of it all coming to life, as I said. So first up is Elena Gorchakova, who is a project officer at the Iucn French Committee. So Elena, over to you. À vous.
Yorana, bonjour à tous. Donc merci Livia pour la présentation. Merci Andrew pour la présentation du standard mondial sur lequel nous avons également travaillé. Donc je suis chargée de mission au sein de l'antenne Pacifique du comité français de l'Iucn, et on travaille avec les territoires français spécifiquement du Pacifique, mais aussi avec l'ensemble des autres territoires. Aujourd'hui, je vais juste partager mon écran. Hop. Voilà. Alors, le comité français de l'Iucn, nous avons travaillé sur l'élaboration du standard mondial et on accompagne les acteurs qui travaillent sur le terrain pour mettre en place des solutions fondées sur la nature. D'une part, pour valoriser les projets qui sont déjà en cours et qui peuvent être qualifiés de solutions fondées sur la nature. Et d'autre part, pour accompagner les acteurs qui sont en train de préparer leurs projets et pour que ces projets répondent au standard mondial de l'Iucn. Et nous avons notamment élaboré un guide spécial qui va bientôt sortir, qui va accompagner les gestionnaires. Aujourd'hui, nous avons décidé de mettre en focus sur la protection des mangroves comme solution fondée sur la nature. Alors, pourquoi les mangroves? Les mangroves rendent de nombreux services. Ici, sur le schéma, vous les voyez. Et notamment, donc, ça répond aux défis posés par la société, qui donc, fait partie des solutions fondées sur la nature, de la définition même. Et notamment la lutte contre le changement climatique et la gestion des risques naturels, comme notamment les risques côtiers. Alors, au Comité français de l'Iucn, nous sommes en charge du pôle relais zone humide tropicale au niveau national. Et nous accompagnons les acteurs sur le terrain en proposant des outils d'accompagnement des gestionnaires. Donc, nous avons ici, vous voyez quelques exemples de ces outils. Nous avons développé notamment des guides de restauration des mangroves qui existent en français et en anglais. Aussi des guides juridiques qui sont disponibles pour tous les territoires français spécifiques pour chaque territoire, pas encore pour tout le Pacifique. Et ensuite, aussi une application mobile qui permet à tout public, aux gestionnaires, aussi au grand public, d'observer les mangroves, de mieux connaître les différentes espèces de palétuviers qui constituent les mangroves et aussi de signaler les perturbations, les dégradations de ces milieux. Donc, ainsi aider les gestionnaires. Donc, j'invite tous les participants francophones pour l'instant de télécharger cette application et donc de contribuer à l'observation des mangroves et appuyer les gestionnaires. Ensuite, donc, pour conclure, et avant de passer la parole aux acteurs sur le terrain, on a vu donc, que les mangroves, la gestion des mangroves représente un exemple de solution fondée sur la nature, à condition de répondre bien sûr aux standards mondiaux. Il est important de parler non seulement de la restauration, mais aussi de la gestion et de la mise en gestion efficace et durable des mangroves dans le Pacifique. Et enfin, les moyens doivent être à la hauteur des enjeux. Donc, il est important de mettre en place, de donner des moyens de gestion technique et surtout des moyens financiers aux acteurs sur le terrain. Et je suis donc ravie de passer la parole aux associations et aux services territoriaux donc, qui sont sur le terrain tous les jours, qui mettent en place des projets de gestion des mangroves. Et le premier intervenant, c'est l'association Iucn de la Nouvelle-Calédonie, qui sont au nord de la Nouvelle-Calédonie et qui gère un site de patrimoine mondial de l'UNESCO. Et donc, c'est Glenn et Amaury de l'association Iucn. Et merci beaucoup pour votre attention. Merci.
Bonjour. Cool, merci beaucoup. Et allez-y, Amaury et Glenn.
Bonjour, Glenn, je suis le représentant de l'association Iucn, qui est située dans le nord-est de la Nouvelle-Calédonie. Nous œuvrons pour la préservation d'un bien classé à l'UNESCO avec un esprit participatif. Je vais donner la parole à Amaury, qui est notre animateur, afin qu'il va vous montrer tout le travail que nous avons fait depuis plusieurs années sur notre zone. Je reprendrai la parole à la fin pour parler un peu plus des échanges d'expérience et des recommandations. Merci.
Bonjour à tous, donc je m'appelle Amaury Urbano, je suis l'animateur de l'association Iucn. Donc vous pouvez voir devant nous l'îlot palétuvier. Il faut savoir qu'à Tuo, il y a 416 hectares de mangroves et que l'association en 2018, grâce à des fonds BEST, donc de l'Union européenne, on a réussi à faire un inventaire de toutes les espèces de palétuviers sur la commune et à caractériser l'état de santé de la mangrove. Donc ce projet, il a commencé dans un premier temps avec les membres de l'association et des habitants de la commune. On a fait des formations de terrain pour être en capacité de faire les inventaires de ces végétaux. Ensuite, on a été sur le terrain avec des habitants qui nous ont guidés dans les différentes mangroves de la commune. On a été aussi avec les agents des différents services des collectivités. Donc, c'est pas toujours facile d'évoluer dans la mangrove, comme vous pouvez le voir sur cette photo. Et donc, on a aussi travaillé avec un bureau d'études pour faire de la télédétection et coupler à la fois nos données de terrain et les données satellites. Donc, comme je vous l'ai dit, on a fait s'élever le terrain aussi en mer. On a remonté toutes les rivières avec les bateaux. Et on a pu des fois tomber sur des dépotoirs sauvages, donc on a profité de ce travail pour aussi faire un inventaire un petit peu de toutes les zones où il y avait beaucoup de déchets pour ensuite coordonner des collectes. Donc ce travail il a permis de produire ce type de carte. Vous pouvez voir un exemple de carte devant vous. Donc il s'agit donc de la répartition de toutes les espèces de palétuviers sur une zone de la commune de Tuo. En plus de ça, on a pu produire aussi ces cartes-là. Donc vous voyez, c'est l'état de santé donc, de la mangrove de Tuo. Vous pouvez voir les 3 zones oranges, donc c'est les endroits qui sont dégradés. Je vais vous montrer après des images satellites où on verra ces dégradations. Donc partout où ils sont en vert, la mangrove elle est en bon état de santé. Donc en plus de ce travail d'inventaire, les membres de l'association ils ont aussi été formés aux techniques de restauration de la mangrove par des spécialistes. On a mis en place des pépinières, donc on a même travaillé avec la jeunesse pour collecter les propagules. On a organisé des mises en poche avec les habitants de la commune. Et ensuite, on a aussi travaillé avec la collectivité pour remplir la pépinière. Et donc voilà, en 2018, à quoi ressemblait la pépinière de l'association. Donc après avoir produit ces plans pendant à peu près 1 an, donc on a effectué différentes plantations donc dans les secteurs dégradés. Donc là, vous pouvez voir le président de l'association en route. Donc juste derrière lui, c'était une zone qui était dégradée par la route. Il y avait un projet de pont, ils ont rasé la mangrove. Et vous pouvez voir quelques années après les plantations, le résultat avec les habitants. On a aussi planté du coup avec les différents établissements scolaires de la commune. Après, ce n'est pas le tout de planter, il faut venir entretenir les plantations. Donc là, vous pouvez voir un membre de l'association qui est sur le terrain. Donc on note les taux de survie, on enlève les algues qui s'accrochent dans les différents plants. Et quand les plants disparaissent, on repique des propagules, on rajoute des plants. Donc ça, c'est les suivis qu'on fait régulièrement avec les membres de l'association. Et en plus de ce projet qu'on a réalisé sur le mangrove, l'association a travaillé dans une tribu de Touault. Il y a 11 tribus sur la commune de Touault. Donc là, vous pouvez voir une vieille dame qui est maintenant décédée. Et grâce à elle, en fait, on a pu faire un travail, c'est traduire tous les noms de palétuviers dans la langue de Touault, en tchemoui. Et ensuite, grâce à ce travail-là, on a travaillé avec les habitants pour mettre en place un sentier dans la mangrove. Donc vous pouvez voir les poteaux qui sont en train d'être placés par les habitants. Et ensuite, on a placé des panneaux d'identification. Et depuis, on organise des visites dans le sentier. Là, dans la dernière quinzaine de jours, on a fait la visite de 177 élèves, donc du coup de la maternelle jusqu'au lycée. Vous pouvez voir une des classes du sentier. Et donc pour revenir sur les zones dégradées, donc depuis mai de cette année, l'association réalise un projet avec le ministère de l'Environnement en France. Donc juste devant vous, c'est une photo aérienne de la tribu de Kiawah. Les 3 grosses zones où on voit l'eau, en fait, c'est les endroits qui ont été dégradés par le bétail. Le bétail, à force de circuler, en fait, a créé des trouées. Et donc là, on est en train de retravailler avec la population pour tout autour des zones dégradées, reposer une barrière qui avant était existante et ensuite restaurer la zone. Vous pouvez voir voilà, les dégâts au niveau du sol que le bétail fait. Et donc voilà le type de clôture qu'on est en train de travailler. On est en train de travailler dessus avec la population. Donc, ce n'est pas des poteaux qui sont secs. On travaille à partir de boutures. Comme ça, les espèces d'insectes et d'oiseaux peuvent continuer à circuler. Et maintenant, je vais repasser la parole à Glenn qui va vous donner un petit peu de recommandations.
Oui, donc je reprends la parole. Par nous, on s'est rendu compte que ce qui était très important dans ce genre de travail, c'est de regarder l'esprit participatif des différents acteurs, aussi bien administratifs, coutumières, parce que nous avons aussi des structures coutumières ici, à Touault, et puis aussi les associations. Car sans cet esprit participatif et du travail des uns et des autres par petits morceaux, là où ils sont, eh bien, il est très difficile de travailler. Partager l'expérience, ça nous paraît essentiel, aussi bien avec les gens de notre zone ici, mais aussi avec les gens du Pacifique, de toute la région du Pacifique. Concernant aussi le travail donc, par rapport aux structures coutumières, nous, c'est vraiment quelque chose qui est essentiel parce qu'on veut vraiment que les gens, là où ils sont, eh bien, ils se protègent leur milieu. Donc voilà un peu nous comment on ressent les choses sur le terrain. Et on va même un peu plus loin, c'est que la dernière fois, c'est nous qui avons interpellé des services provinciaux sur le code de l'environnement. On s'aperçoit qu'à l'intérieur des services techniques de la province, eh bien, il y a beaucoup de manque de connaissances. Et donc, nous, on les a interpellés pour qu'ils puissent devoir pour faire des formations à leur personnel. Je parle bien du personnel technique, mais souvent les services qui entretiennent les bords de route, etc., qui touchent à la mangrove sans vraiment savoir que derrière, il y a une réglementation et ben, des fois, ça cause des dégâts. Et donc, la dernière fois, c'est nous-mêmes, l'association, qui avons interpellé. Donc, on a inversé un peu les rôles, interpellé les services provinciaux pour qu'ils essaient de former mieux leur personnel. Voilà un peu tout ce que nous, on a à dire sur le travail du terrain et ce qui se passe ici dans la zone de Touault. Je vous remercie.
Merci à tous.
Eh ben, thank you and merci to Amaury and to Glenn. It was, it's an amazing, sorry, I just had the translation on, which was really stressing me out because I was listening to you in French. Anyway, I've closed my translation now. So just to say a big thank you. What an inspiring restorative project on the ground and integrating community, and particularly the children who are literally going to inherit this work many years from now, and hopefully in a much better condition than when they saw it when they were little young wee tots. So again, thank you so much for your hard work. Really, truly inspiring for me, and I'm sure for the rest of those who are watching. So we're going to hear now from Florian Lebaille, who is a biodiversity officer as well. Welcome, Florian, and looking forward to hearing your story as well.
Bonjour à tous, salutations de l'après-midi. Donc, moi, je vais vous présenter faire une petite présentation des actions de préservation de la mangrove sur Wallis et Futuna. Donc, je ne me suis pas concerté avec mes collègues de Nouvelle-Calédonie de Iucn, mais c'est une présentation qui va reprendre un petit peu tout le moment. Je vais couper aussi l'audio. Voilà, très bien. Voilà. Donc, au niveau des actions de restauration de la mangrove, je n'ai pas réussi à enlever. 2 petites secondes, j'ai un petit problème technique au niveau
Pas de stress, tout va bien.
L'audio désactivé. Voilà. Voilà. Donc, au niveau des actions de préservation de la mangrove, en fait, il y a eu déjà donc, par le passé des petites actions ponctuelles initiées par les villages pour restaurer les mangroves dans quelques villages de Wallis, notamment dans le sud. Mais c'est dans le cadre d'un projet BEST 2.0 aussi, comme mes collègues de Calédonie, qui s'est déroulé entre 2017 et 2018, qui a eu vraiment des gros moyens humains et financiers qui ont permis de restaurer cet écosystème. Les actions qui ont eu lieu dans le cadre de ce projet BEST, c'est une cartographie satellite. Donc nous, on n'a pas autant d'espèces de palétuviers, donc c'est pas les mêmes cartes. On n'a que 2 espèces de palétuviers à Wallis. On n'a pas de mangrove à Futuna, donc c'était un projet qui s'est concentré sur Wallis. Il y a eu également des opérations de nettoyage. On a identifié aussi des zones qui pouvaient accueillir donc, des plantations de palétuviers dans certains villages. Et dans ces villages-là, il y a eu des pépinières de créées. Et quelques mois plus tard, comme mes collègues de Calédonie, il y a eu les plantations de ces palétuviers par les villages, mais aussi par les scolaires. Donc ça, c'est le type de carte qui a pu être fourni pour les cartographies satellites et qui a pu nous fournir le chiffre de 32 hectares de mangroves sur Wallis. Donc ça, c'est un outil important qui va nous permettre après, donc au fur et à mesure, là, si on a des nouvelles cartes, de regarder un petit peu l'évolution de l'état de santé de cet écosystème, aussi par rapport aux mesures de préservation qui sont prises et dont je vais vous parler plus tard. Voilà, donc dans ce projet BEST Mangrove, donc, après la cartographie satellite qui a été faite initialement, il y a eu des sites qui ont été sélectionnés, des villages pilotes qui ont été sélectionnés, et il y a eu des pépinières dans chaque village qui ont été montées par les villageois et par les écoliers. Et donc, quelques mois plus tard, donc, des plantations par les villages et par les scolaires aussi. Donc, le bilan de ce projet BEST 2, là, c'est déjà les points positifs, c'est qu'il y a eu une montée en compétences des associations. Et en fait, ça va leur permettre dans le futur de réitérer ce genre d'opération plus facilement. Il y a eu également la sensibilisation des scolaires. Ça s'est fait juste sur une école, mais vous verrez plus tard que ça s'est développé sur tout le territoire. Et le point positif, c'est également la plantation donc, de 4,5 hectares de mangroves durant le projet. Point négatif, c'est qu'on a constaté une mortalité importante sur les palétuviers plantés, donc différentes raisons possibles. Une des raisons, c'est que le projet a duré 1 an et demi seulement et que derrière, il n'y a pas forcément eu le suivi nécessaire pour que la totalité des palétuviers survivent. Voilà, donc en fait, ce projet BEST 2, il a initié tout un type un grand nombre d'actions en rapport avec la mangrove sur le territoire. Et là, par exemple, c'est le cas d'un autre projet BEST 2. Celui-là, c'était un projet donc régional porté par le PROE, c'était le Pacific Biodiversity Blue Belt. Et donc, on a pu réaliser un sentier pédagogique sur le thème de la mangrove sur le village de Vaitupu. Donc là, vous voyez ma collègue Sandrine Job là, qui a réalisé ce sentier-là et donc qui a été inauguré par le préfet en présence des scolaires en septembre 2018. Et donc, on utilise cet outil, ce sentier pédagogique. En fait, l'année dernière, on a réalisé en partenariat avec les écoles et les responsables pédagogiques de la direction de l'enseignement catholique. On a réalisé un programme pédagogique sur 1 an avec des activités en classe et des visites sur le terrain, sur la mangrove et sur le sentier pédagogique. Et on a pu ainsi sensibiliser tout au long de l'année 300 élèves. Donc, ce projet-là a été récompensé l'année dernière par la Palme d'Or Ifrecore dans le Pacifique. Et tout récemment, là, donc, pour finir avec les actions en faveur de la préservation de la mangrove, le Code de l'environnement de Wallis et Futuna prévoyait à l'origine une liste des espèces protégées. Le Code de l'environnement date de 2007 et cette liste n'avait pas été prise jusqu'à présent. Et en août 2020, donc, les élus ont voté une liste des espèces protégées dont font partie les 2 espèces de palétuviers que l'on trouve à Wallis. Donc, avec notamment des mesures pour, en cas de dégradation, des amendes, voilà, prévues dans le Code de l'environnement. Donc, les perspectives dans le futur à Wallis, nous, au niveau du service de l'environnement, on aimerait bien encourager les opérations de replantation en partenariat avec les villages. Là, c'est un peu petit sur l'écran, mais je vous ai mis une carte qui a été réalisée dans le cadre d'une expertise d'un expert de l'Université de Nouvelle-Calédonie, Michel Allenbach, et sur cette carte-là, on peut voir, il a identifié en fait les zones prioritaires qui mériteraient des aménagements pour la protection du littoral. Donc, il y a différentes couleurs. Rouge, c'est vraiment des aménagements très prioritaires, et bleu, vert, c'est des choses un petit peu moins prioritaires, mais sur lesquelles il faut travailler quand même. Et en fait, ça représente un linéaire vraiment important. Et c'est pas possible en fait au niveau de toute façon au niveau écologique, c'est pas terrible, mais même au niveau du coût, c'est impossible d'équiper tout ce linéaire là en enrochement. Donc on va proposer au village une alternative à ces enrochements comme solution fondée sur la nature, la plantation de palétuviers, avec comme point positif, je vous l'ai dit, un coût qui est moindre, des services écosystémiques importants associés, et aussi l'implication d'une grande partie de la population. Donc, si j'avais des recommandations à faire pour la suite, ce serait qu'on permette en fait le financement sur le long terme de ces opérations de replantation. Tout à l'heure, je vous ai parlé du projet BEST qui a duré 1 an et demi. Là, on est sur de la restauration écologique. Donc, le pas de temps, c'est pas vraiment 1 an et demi. Il faudrait réfléchir à des projets qui soient un peu plus longs et qui prennent en compte également le suivi pour s'assurer que ces projets fonctionnent. Et comme mes projets Iucn, comme mes collègues de Iucn aussi, c'est important qu'on bénéficie d'un accompagnement technique et scientifique, et notamment des retours d'expérience de ce qui peut se faire dans différents territoires. Elena vous a parlé tout à l'heure des guides méthodologiques, donc ça c'est le genre de choses sur lesquelles on peut s'appuyer. Et dernière recommandation, c'est quand même continuer les efforts de sensibilisation des populations, parce que ça touche déjà les jeunes, mais on essaie de toucher également les chefs coutumiers, qui sont les principaux relais ici à Wallis au niveau de la population. Voilà, je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Florian, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. That was, again, another inspirational rendition of the work that you're all doing in Wallis and Futuna, sorry. And also, I completely agree with you. We all need that sort of long-term funding to ensure that the work that is started continues for generations to come, not just for a year at a time. It's quite frustrating. So definitely agree. We need to get that going. But again, congratulations. What an amazing piece of work that you've been leading there. So now that sort of wraps up that first part. We're going to move on to the next part of our session. So I'm pleased to introduce Oscar Guevara. Oscar joins us from WWF Colombia, where he is a senior climate and biodiversity specialist. He has worked in this field of climate and disaster risk reduction for more than 20 years, so brings a wealth of experience and knowledge today. So pleased to welcome Oscar now to discuss how nature-based solutions can be used as a policy tool to connect environmental conventions and the SDGs, as well as bring nature and biodiversity loss to the political forefront. Over to you, Oscar.
Thank you. I'm trying to share my screen. Is it working? Okay, thank you. Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. I'm Oscar Guevara from World Wildlife Fund. I will make a short presentation about how we are trying to position nature-based solutions as a tool, as a mechanism to achieve carbon neutrality and to be nature positive by 2030. So first, I would like to start to mention that, oh, it's not working. Let me see. Okay. So basically, the fundamental concept behind my presentation is that nature-based solutions should be at the heart of the climate, biodiversity, and sustainable development multilateral agenda. Basically, what we are saying is that by positioning nature-based solutions as a central element, as a core part of what we as humans are agreeing in the different multilateral agendas, is the only way to achieve what we are aiming in those multilateral agreements. Basically, if we don't do our job by recovering nature, by bringing our relation with nature in a different context, in a different perspective, we will not be able to achieve what we promise in the context of the climate agreement, in the biodiversity agreement, and also in the sustainable development agenda. So, we in WWF usually use Iucn's definition. It's probably the most common definition, and there is a lot of agreement behind what the world is now understanding about nature-based solutions. It was mentioned by a couple of the previous speakers. So the most common definitions is actions to protect, sustainable manage, and restore natural modified ecosystem that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively. So I'm just trying to highlight here that basically what we understand and what we are aiming for in the context of nature-based solutions are ecosystem-based approaches, whether if it is in the context of conservation or sustainable management, restoration, etc., is that is an ecosystem-based approach. And of course, it needs to be explicit that this approach is aiming to address societal challenges. So what it's very complicated, it's that somehow what science is telling us is that now we are living in a planet that is dominated by human activities. This is why we are calling now the Anthropocene. And why we are calling this the Anthropocene? Because human activity is the main driving force of the planet transformation. The graphs that are being displayed in the slide behind me is what is called the Great Acceleration. So basically over the last century, the increasing population, in energy use, in fertilizer consumption, water use, emissions of greenhouse gases, etc., has increased dramatically. Actually, it's not dramatically, it's exponentially over the last decades. And as a result, that's why we are calling this the Anthropocene. So it's a new era in our planet where humans are the main drivers of transformation in the planet. So basically, I'm saying this because it's among us, humans, to bring back nature and to recover nature, because what we are seeing as a triple crisis, the pandemic related to the COVID-19 zoonotic disease, what we are seeing here in the context of climate change, but also in the context of biodiversity loss, is mostly driven by human activity. So saying this is that, again, in the context of this triple crisis of the pandemic, biodiversity loss, and climate change, all these three crises share interdependent or mutually reinforcing drivers. And they are all linked to our unsustainable relation with nature. Basically, what we are doing by transforming ecosystems, whether if it is terrestrial ecosystems or marine ecosystems or freshwater ecosystems, deforestation, land use change, to the different activities related with that negative transformation, they are all linked to this triple crisis. And of course, if we do not modify our sustainable relation with nature, it won't be possible to get out of this triple crisis. So what we are trying to do is that beyond doing a lot of advocacy in these multiple forums, like the sorry, Iucn plenary, the UNFCCC negotiation, the CVD negotiation, etc. But actually, we are advocating that countries understand that healthy ecosystems underpin resilient nations. So basically, if we are facing climate change, the consequences of climate change, if we are facing the consequences of biodiversity loss, if we are now facing the consequences of the pandemic, we need healthy ecosystems to bring back our economies, but also to bring back human welfare. And if we cannot achieve, sorry, if we are not able to reverse the tendency of biodiversity loss, basically we will not be able to have resilient nations, resilient economy, and resilient development for everyone. So by 2020, by 2021, what we are asking is that there is a global movement to position nature in the center of multiple multilateral agreements, like the 2030 SDG agenda. Of course, what is happening in the context of the next COP in the UK, the ongoing negotiations of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. But basically, at the end, they share a common message, is that we need to raise the importance of nature in the different actions and policy frameworks. I will give you one example, what we are doing in the climate negotiations. Specifically in the context of the climate agenda, for us in WWF, there is something really important to mention, is that nature-based solutions should be intentionally planned to deliver tangible climate adaptation and mitigation impacts. Most people refer to nature-based solutions as a generic term, or without having a good understanding the profound implications of positioning nature into the climate agenda. And for us, it's really important that nature and nature-based solutions should be intentionally planned to deliver those climate mitigation adaptation impacts. And of course, the other part of our key message here is that it should have positive impacts both in ecosystems and in human development. So it shouldn't be a trade-off between climate benefits and human benefits, and also in biodiversity benefits. They should all be in line, and we should avoid these trade-offs between what we are aiming as an outcome of nature-based solutions. Another key element here is that we are also repeating over and over again, is that nature-based solutions should be grounded in sound science. We know now that land-based conservation and restoration can provide something around 30% of the cost-effective climate change mitigation needed to achieve the target of the Paris Agreement. So we know that nature-based solutions are actually one of the best tools that we have right now to go for a very ambitious climate mitigation agenda. So what also know is that those land-based conservation and restoration approaches have substantial co-benefits in the adaptation agenda. We know that resilient ecosystems can be able to provide ecosystem services that are critical for food security, water security, disaster reduction, etc. So basically what we have here is a very powerful concept. But of course, what this slide is trying to highlight is that it's extremely important that these nature-based solutions in the climate context should be grounded in sound science. Another thing is that, of course, it is really important, I mentioned this before, is that in addition to climate benefits, nature-based solutions can also be very effective in addressing different societal challenges, many of them related with sustainable development agenda. So the importance to establish synergies among the different benefits that we can obtain on nature-based solutions is very important. But when we say that, is that one of the elements that many times do not receive sufficient attention is or are environmental and social safeguards. Basically, it's not just thinking or proposing nature-based solutions that are good for climate mitigation and adaptation, but to keep in mind that it is essentially important to have strict social environmental safeguards. Also, they include equity, governance, and have a rights-based approach. Then, of course, there is another area. Will be one of my last slides. Is that nature-based solutions are also essential in the context of what is being negotiated in the Convention of Biological Diversity. So the title of this slide is Nature-Based Solutions for Biodiversity. And basically, in this post-2020 Global Biodiversity Agenda, the three main goals are to safeguard our planet's natural spaces, to make production and consumption sustainable, and to stop the loss of species and diversity of life. So right here is that if we really want to reverse the tendency of biodiversity loss, nature-based solutions are one of the best tools we have in hand to actually make this vision real. Why? Because nature-based solutions, of course, is important in the three main elements that WEF is trying to position in the context of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. The first one is related to how we can address all the drivers of biodiversity loss, including climate change. So we know that nature-based solutions can be very effective in the context of both climate mitigation and adaptation. So if we implement nature-based solutions to address or to slow down the velocity, the speed of climate change, we are addressing one of the drivers of biodiversity loss. But also we know that productive sectors, that right now all economic sectors are related with, in certain level with as drivers of biodiversity loss. We want economic sectors to be compatible with nature, and nature-based solutions can offer a good framework actually to address or to bring those economic sectors in the context of the nature positive agenda. And one element that also somehow is missing from the negotiations and from certain policies and projects is that not only nature is good for the climate agenda or for sustainable development agenda, it is also very important that we help nature to adapt. We need to facilitate actions to actually sustainably manage those ecosystems, so those ecosystems can be resilient in the context of climate change, but also can be resilient in the context of different threats and different hazards. So one of the things is that not just pretend that nature by itself would be sufficient in order to address different societal challenges. It's also important that we help nature to adapt. And of course, we are aiming for one goal in the context of the CBD post-2020 framework, is that nature's benefit to all people, current and future generations. So here is important that we are bringing this intergenerational agenda, can be secured and sustainably enhanced, contributing to the realization to the right of a safe, clean, healthy, and stable climate for all. So basically, is that nature, it's absolutely essential for almost all dimensions of sustainable development. Let's see, if we want to reach a safe environment, a healthy environment, a sustainable environment, and a sustainable climate, we need to secure nature's contribution to people for current and future generation. And how we are aiming to do that? And this is very simple. Nature-based solutions are linked to area-based targets. We need to be sure that all sites of importance for those ecosystem-based approaches, for climate adaptation, for climate mitigation, for food security, for water security, for disaster risk reduction, should be properly conserved. So basically, this is all linked to an area-based target, is that when we are talking about nature-based solution is far from being just a conceptual framework or a concept that happens only in policy making. Is that nature-based solutions are linked to area-based targets. So basically, if we want to implement nature-based solutions for biodiversity, for climate, for sustainable development, we need to ensure that all sites of importance for those ecosystem-based approaches are conserved and are sustainably managed. So basically, this is finally the final message regarding to how we are aiming to position nature-based solutions in the different multilateral agenda. Of course,
Oscar, I'm so sorry, Oscar. I am going to have to call time because we literally are running well over time in terms of allowing the people to actually to ask questions. I'm really sorry. I know it was one of your final slide. Yeah.
Okay.
But look, thank you so much for this really important piece of work that you are doing, and how important nature is in terms of ensuring that we are going to have a climate safe future for all of us. But what I'd like to do now quickly is to open the floor, and just a reminder of what you've heard today from as a participant. You've heard from Andrew with respect to global standards and the Iucn French committee team, Amaury, Glenn, Elena, and Florian on these amazing projects around mangroves. And then, of course, from Oscar around how do we achieve a carbon neutral, nature positive world by 2030 using nature at the forefront. So by all means, please use the Q&A on the Zoom or on the platform, on the conference platform, and we will transfer the questions onto the Q&A. There's been some great ones to date, and even though one of them is answered already online, I might just read it out for those who are less knowledgeable about mangroves, like myself, which is around the mortality rates of mangroves and the fact that restoration is difficult. So could you explain to all the participants what we can do to ensure that mortality rates are kept to a minimum? Anyone? Florian, Elena, whoever would like to take that question.
Oui, j'ai répondu un petit peu déjà dans les questions qui ont été posées. De mon expérience, de mon expérience, c'est qu'il faut vraiment réaliser un suivi. Hein. Donc, l'association OU en Calédonie, on voit qu'ils plantent, mais derrière, il y a des gens pour suivre un petit peu les plantations qui ont été réalisées. Si jamais ça n'a pas pris, ça arrive. Ils sont là derrière pour remettre des palétuviers. Nous, c'est un petit peu ce qui a bloqué. On n'avait pas les ressources humaines nécessaires pour réaliser ce suivi-là sur ce projet qui était très court. Donc, c'est vrai que ce suivi est très important. Et peut-être qu'aussi, on aurait pu bénéficier d'un appui spécifique en amont pour vraiment voir s'il y avait des zones qui ont été plantées durant le projet qui étaient vraiment opportunes ou pas. Ça, c'est les deux aspects que je vois. Si les gens veulent compléter, n'hésitez pas.
Merci, Florian. That's fantastic. Another really interesting question here to all speakers. So anyone would like to answer this. As nature-based solutions need to be context-specific, should nature-based solutions in the region specifically include food security co-benefits in the current context some of the Pacific Islands are facing? So should it include food security, nature-based solutions?
Hi, Olivia, I'll jump in on that one.
Thanks, Andrew.
Absolutely. I think if it fits within the particular context of the investment or activity that you're doing, I think it's a key societal challenge here in the Pacific moving forward. That food security or lack can be driven by a whole bunch of factors, including natural disasters. We think droughts and the climate change and those sorts of things as well. But pandemic factors obviously is a new one now for us. So if it's relevant for an intervention, then definitely it should be part of the context here.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. And I think we have time for one final quick answer. How can nature be positioned as a central element in decision-making around deep sea mining? So quite different at a national, regional and international levels. Any thoughts on deep sea mining and nature-based solutions? That's a tough one.
Sorry to jump in, panel. Starting with the precautionary principle, which is certainly what Iucn and many other organisations take, then that's the beginning of that having nature at the heart. But I'd be interested to hear other thoughts as well.
Nope. Good, solid question, Andrew. Thank you very much for putting yourself forward on that one. But it looks like we have come to time. I'm so sorry to say. So I just wanted to do a very quick thank you to all of our panelists here today, to Amaury and Glenn, to Oscar, to Elena, Florian, and of course, Andrew. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you as well to all the translators behind. That's a really incredible job they do, and all the technical team that's made this a possibility. It's getting to be really perfect. That was very smooth. So on behalf of WWF New Zealand Aotearoa, I'm very humbled to have been able to moderate this super interesting session today. I hope you've learned a lot, and make sure that you go to the links in the chat. There's been a lot of sharing in the chat, which has been fantastic. And if you do have any further questions, you know to use the conference platform and keep connecting during the conference. So with that in mind, kia ora, kia kaha, and have a wonderful rest of conference to you all.